Mohammed الشايع from Kuwait, الشايع Group. I just want to add to the panel. We have plans to invest billions of dollars in projects in lifestyle shopping centers. And I have to say the good news that the banks are more interested now to fund than last year. So we have oversubscription to fund the avenues of Riyadh, which is $3.4 billion, and in future in Eastern Province. Also, I want to say to you, Princess Rima, that we are starting to have girls baristas in Starbucks. And this is really a shift, and we are very excited. And also another piece of information. We employ 2,000 women. They will save money when they drive. And this will go into the economy. The question to the government, are you going to compete with the private sector? Or you're going to incentivize the private sector?
May I answer this question? It's been never the intention to compete with the private sector. The government of Saudi Arabia has been all spearheading all the time areas where they want to restore confidence and pull some private sectors and to reassure private sector that investment in such sector is attractive. Take, for example, the Neom new city and the Red Sea and the Al Qiddiya city. The government will bring the private sector, but it has to be the agent of change and the spearheading leader that will make private sector is comfortable and assured about their investment.
Sorry, just very quickly. I think this is a very, very critical point, and I understand where he's coming from, and I've heard it a few times, including from people in this room. We would not have had Jubail and Yamba petrochemical industries if the government did not step in. Private sector did not start that initiative. The government started it and then gave it to the private sector to continue. I think what the government is doing is looking at sectors, industries, specific investments that are either too large for the private sector to take risk on, or new, have not been tapped, or existed but the private sector decided not to. For example, recycling. We've been talking about recycling for 40 years. 40 years. Everybody's talking about it. And no real investment. So the government had to step in and invest. We are investing in military industries. But what the government is doing, actually, the government is creating the ecosystem. The government is saying, we are building the infrastructure, building the regulatory framework, and inviting the private sector to come in. BIF is investing 80 billion only in this year in Saudi Arabia. Who is going to execute this 80 billion investment? The private sector. The private sector will build, the private sector will supply, the private sector will partner with. So definitely the intention is not to compete with, but there will always be times when the private sector feels pressured because there is an opportunity that they did not invest in. And for Mr. Al-Shaia, I think he is actually an example. He is going to open his first cinema actually before the government. The government is investing in cinema theaters because they believe that potentially the market for this is going to be very difficult for the private sector to begin with, and they want to set example. But I think most likely he will start before they are, or others will start in the private sector before the government starts. So definitely no. I don't know, Salman, if you have.
In less than 1 minute, if you look at our vision realization program, His Excellency is leading an initiative called Local Champions. This is taking 100 Saudi companies regionally and potentially globally. So that's the government supporting those companies in many ways, regulatorily and supporting financially, et cetera, et cetera. Privatization, it's all about PPP, public partnership with the private sector. And there are 128 opportunities the government want to let go and give to the private sector to manage and be more efficient. And the recent stimulus package that was announced through the budget of 72 billion riyal, basically to stimulate the private sector. So to answer Mr. Muhammad al-Shaia question, I think the government intention by 2030 is to have an economy led by the private sector.
And just before we wrap it up, and some incredible insights from everyone here today, but a question I think that should be answered, and just so you can set the record straight in terms of what happened at the Ritz-Carlton. A lot of people still worried about investing in Saudi Arabia, just wondering what happened, even though there was significant support for the corruption crackdown from inside the kingdom. Set the record straight there. Should people be worried about what happens to them when they come and invest in Saudi Arabia?
Absolutely not. The answer is absolutely not. I think what we are doing, we are basically creating a level playing field. We are actually encouraging investors to come, telling them that it will be your quality and your price and nothing else that will determine whether you're successful or otherwise. I think the message is very clear to our own private sector that what we touched out of the Saudi economy is very small. If we were targeting the private sector or investors, the outreach would have been a lot larger. So this is very targeted, very specific to send the right message that we are not going to tolerate this. We have zero tolerance to corruption, and that's what we are going to do in the future.
2 points. One, the number of people who were in these events at the Ritz were very, very small to the number of companies operating in Saudi Arabia. So the majority, as His Majesty the King said in the Shura Council a month ago, is the decent, good private sector companies and individuals. This is one. Two, I think we made sure through the process that the private sector continues to operate, and we've made that crystal clear, and I think we have succeeded in doing so. So that's another evidence that the intention of the government to make sure that the continuity and the sustainability of private sector is there.
Excellent.